Lillian Cross had learned not to expect much from birthdays. When she was younger, they had been modest but warm. A boxed cake from the grocery store. 1 or 2 candles, never matching her age because they reused whatever was left in the drawer. Her mother would clap softly, smiling like the moment mattered more than the details. After her mother died, birthdays slowly lost their shape. They became dates she noticed only when the day felt heavier than usual. Turning 31 didn't feel different. It just felt quiet. The Reed house was unusually still that morning. No footsteps from the upper floor. No voices drifting down the hall. Even the hum of the refrigerator sounded louder than normal. Lillian moved through the kitchen with practiced efficiency, wiping counters already clean, aligning chairs that no one would sit in. The house was beautiful in the way museums were beautiful. Polished, expensive, untouched. She lived there technically. A narrow room at the back of the 3rd floor, with a small window that overlooked the hedges instead of the view. It was enough. It had to be. Thomas Reed left for work just before 8. He paused near the entryway, adjusting his cufflinks. "Good morning, Lillian," he said as he always did. "Good morning, sir." He nodded once and left. The door closed with a soft, final sound. She watched the empty space where he'd stood, then turned back to her list. Laundry, floors, guest wing inspection, dinner prep, normal things, safe things. Around noon she drove to the grocery store. She kept her head down as she walked the aisles, choosing the same brand she always did. Bread, milk, vegetables. She told herself she didn't need anything else. She paused in front of the bakery case longer than she meant to. The cupcakes were arranged in neat rows, overly cheerful with their bright frosting and plastic decorations. She reached for one without thinking. Vanilla, pale yellow icing. No writing, no balloons, just one. At the checkout, the cashier smiled. Celebrating something? Lillian hesitated. Just dinner? The lie came easily. Back at the house, the afternoon passed slowly. She folded towels, polished silverware, vacuumed rooms no one had entered in months. The echo of her footsteps followed her everywhere, like the house was listening. By early evening, she had finished everything on her list. She checked it twice anyway. The rest of the staff had the night off. They usually did on Wednesdays. Mr. Reed was still upstairs, locked away in his study. Lillian could tell because the door stayed closed and the light beneath it didn't move. She reheated leftover soup for herself and ate standing at the counter. The kitchen clock ticked loudly. 7 o'clock came. Then 8. Her phone buzzed once. A text from a former coworker she hadn't seen in years. Facebook says it's your birthday. Hope you're doing okay. Lillian stared at the message for a long moment, then slipped the phone back into her pocket without replying. She cleaned the bowl, dried it, put it away. The cupcake sat untouched on the far end of the marble island, still in its clear container. She told herself she'd eat it later, or tomorrow, or throw it out. At 9 o'clock, she turned off most of the lights. The kitchen dimmed to a soft glow, shadows stretching across the floor. The house felt even larger at night. She stood there listening to the quiet until it pressed in on her chest. Finally, she opened the junk drawer and took out a single candle. White, slightly bent. She stuck it carefully into the center of the cupcake and set the container aside. For a moment, she just stood there with the match in her hand. This is silly, she thought. She struck it anyway. The flame flared, then steadied. The candle burned small but bright, reflected faintly in the polished countertop. Lillian leaned her elbows against the island and watched it, breathing slowly. She didn't make a wish. She didn't smile. She just let the moment exist. If this story feels familiar so far, if you've ever had a quiet birthday like this, you might want to stay close. Some stories unfold slowly, and the ones worth hearing usually do. The flame flickered. Somewhere above her, the house shifted. Pipes clicked. A distant footstep echoed. Lillian reached forward to blow out the candle. Before she could, A voice filled the kitchen. "Lillian." It came from the ceiling. The intercom crackled once, then went silent again. Her heart jumped. "Yes, sir?" she called, her voice suddenly small in the wide room. There was a pause, long enough for her to wonder if she'd imagined it. Then the speaker came alive again. "Come to me. Now." The flame trembled, and Lillian realized this birthday was not going to end the way she thought it would. The next morning arrived too quickly. Lillian barely slept. When she did, her dreams were shallow and restless, filled with half-formed sounds and the image of a flickering flame that refused to go out. She woke before her alarm, staring at the ceiling of her small room, listening to the quiet hum of the house coming back to life. For a brief, disorienting moment, she wondered if the intercom call had been a dream. Then she remembered the way her hands had shaken as she climbed the stairs. The way Mr. Reed's voice had sounded, controlled but not casual. The way the study door had been open, waiting. She sat up slowly and rubbed her face. Nothing had happened. Not yet. Downstairs, the house felt the same as always. Clean, calm, detached. Sunlight poured through the tall windows, catching dust motes in the air. Lillian moved through her routine with muscle memory, her body doing what her mind couldn't focus on. She brewed coffee for Mr. Reed at precisely 6:45. Dark roast. One sugar packet left untouched on the saucer just in case. He never used it, but he liked it there. She laid out the morning paper on the side table near the stairs. Folded once. No creases out of place. These details mattered here. They were how she stayed invisible. Mr. Reed came down at 7 sharp. He wore a navy suit, his expression neutral, his movements economical. He nodded at her, just as he always did. "Good morning," he said. "Good morning, sir." He picked up the mug, took a sip, and paused slightly. She watched from the corner of her eye, waiting for a comment that never came. He carried the coffee into the sitting room and began skimming the paper. Normal. Too normal. Lillian busied herself with the sink, scrubbing an already spotless pan. Her thoughts drifted back to the night before. To the cupcake. To the candle. To the words that had echoed through the kitchen like a command instead of a request. "Come to me. Now." She hadn't told anyone it was her birthday. Not Mr. Reed. Not the staff. Not even the few people she still spoke to occasionally. The house had known anyway. Or at least the systems inside it had. That unsettled her more than she liked to admit. The Reed house was smart. Smarter than most. Motion sensors. Environmental monitors. Cameras she rarely noticed anymore because she'd learned where not to stand. She had been told they were for security. For safety. Still, the idea that a single candle had been logged, time-stamped, flagged, made her skin prickle. After breakfast, Mr. Reed retreated upstairs without a word. The study door closed behind him. Lillian waited, counted her breaths. Listened. Nothing happened. The day stretched out. She cleaned the guest wing, opening doors that led into unused rooms filled with carefully chosen furniture and no personal items. She dusted framed photographs that showed Mr. Reed at conferences, galas, charity events. Always alone. Always composed. There were no family photos. No children. No candid moments. By mid-afternoon, she found herself slowing down, pausing more often. Her mind kept circling back to the study. To what he had wanted. To what he might say next. Had she done something wrong? She replayed the night step by step. The candle. The intercom. His tone. He hadn't sounded angry. But he hadn't sounded kind either. At 4 o'clock her phone buzzed again. Another message. This time from her aunt in Ohio. A simple one. Hope you're taking care of yourself. Lillian stared at the screen. Her aunt rarely texted. She typed a response, deleted it, typed another. I'm fine. She sent it and slipped the phone back into her pocket, a knot forming in her stomach. By evening, the house grew quiet again. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that made small sounds feel intrusive. The tick of the clock. The click of a light switch. Her own footsteps. She prepared dinner for Mr. Reed and left it warming on the stove. You like to eat late? She knew better than to ask questions. At 7:42 the study door opened. Lillian felt it more than she heard it. Lillian, his voice called from the top of the stairs. She froze for a fraction of a second, then wiped her hands on a towel and stepped into the hallway. Yes, sir? Come upstairs, please. Please. The word changed everything. Or maybe it made things worse. She climbed the stairs slowly, her heartbeat loud in her ears. The study door stood open again, light spilling into the hallway like an invitation she wasn't sure she should accept. As she crossed the threshold, she noticed something new on the desk. A thin folder. And for the first time since she'd started working here, Thomas Reed was watching her. Not as an employee, but as if he was trying to recognize something he had lost. The door clicked shut behind her. The folder sat on the desk like it had always belonged there. Lillian noticed it immediately. It was slim, beige, unmarked. Not the kind of thing that held contracts or financial statements. Too thin for that. It looked more personal. More deliberate. Thomas Reed didn't invite her to sit. He didn't speak right away either. He stood near the window with his back half turned, one hand resting on the sill, looking out over the lawn as if the answer to whatever he was about to say might be written in the grass. You didn't trigger an alarm, he said at last. Lillian blinked. Sir? The candle, he added calmly. It didn't set off a fire alert, but the system logged it. She nodded, unsure what to say. I didn't realize. It's fine, he interrupted. I'm not concerned about the candle. That didn't ease the tension. If anything, it made it worse. He turned to face her. Up close, she noticed lines around his eyes she hadn't seen before. Not age exactly. Fatigue. The kind that came from years of holding something in. You said it was your birthday, he continued. Yes. How old are you now? The question landed heavier than it should have. 31. He nodded slowly as if confirming something to himself. You can sit if you'd like, he said, finally gesturing to the chair across from the desk. She sat, folding her hands in her lap. The chair felt too soft, too expensive. She shifted slightly, uncomfortable. Mr. Reed picked up the folder and opened it, revealing a few papers clipped together. He didn't slide them toward her yet. Where were you born, Lillian? He asked. Ohio, she said. Near Dayton. And you lived there how long? Until I was 9. He glanced down at the papers. Your mother moved often. Yes, Lillian said a little defensively. She did what she had to. I'm not judging, he said quickly. I'm trying to understand. He slid the folder across the desk, stopping just short of her hands. Do you recognize this address? Lillian leaned forward before she could stop herself. The address stared back at her. A small house. 2 bedrooms. Peeling paint. A place she hadn't thought about in years but still knew by heart. She could picture the cracked driveway. The creak of the front steps. The way her mother used to stand at the sink in the evenings, staring out the window like she was waiting for someone who never came. Yes, Lillian said quietly. That's where we lived when I was little. Mr. Reed watched her closely. And did your mother ever speak about her life before that? Lillian frowned. Not much. Did she ever mention a man named Daniel Reed? The air seemed to thin. No, Lillian said. She didn't. Mr. Reed's jaw tightened. Are you certain? Yes, she replied. If she had, I would remember. He nodded, absorbing that. Did she ever tell you anything about your father? Lillian felt a familiar knot form in her chest. She said he wasn't someone who could stay. Mr. Reed closed the folder. The sound was final. Heavy. She didn't tell you his name, he said. No. She didn't tell you what he did for a living. No. She didn't tell you why he left. No. Each question felt like a step closer to something Lillian didn't want to see. Mr. Reed leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. There are things, he said, choosing his words carefully, that people keep quiet for reasons that feel right at the time, even when those reasons hurt someone else. Lillian's hands tightened. Why are you asking me all this? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stood and walked around the desk, stopping just short of her chair. He placed the folder back down, this time opening it again. She caught a glimpse of charts, dates, typed lines of text she couldn't read from where she sat. I came across some information recently, he said. Information that made me question whether certain events in my past had unfolded the way I believed they had. Her pulse quickened. What kind of information? He hesitated. The pause stretched long enough to make her uncomfortable. Medical, he said finally. She swallowed. I don't understand. I imagine you don't, he replied. Not yet. Lillian stood abruptly. If this is about my job. It isn't, he said firmly. You haven't done anything wrong. Then what is it about? She asked, her voice shaking despite her effort to control it. He looked at her for a long moment. His eyes held something she couldn't name. Not anger. Not kindness. Regret, maybe. There's a possibility, he said slowly, that you and I are connected in a way neither of us anticipated. The words hovered between them, unfinished. Connected how? Lillian wanted to ask. Needed to ask. But before she could, Mr. Reed reached into the folder and pulled out a single sheet of paper. I want you to look at this, he said. He turned it toward her. And as Lillian leaned forward to read it, a cold understanding began to creep in. One that told her this conversation was about to cross a line there would be no stepping back from. The paper trembled slightly as Lillian reached for it. She told herself it was just nerves. That anyone would feel uneasy sitting across from their employer while being shown private documents. Still, the moment her fingers touched the page, a strange weight settled in her chest. At first, the words didn't make sense. Numbers, columns, a chart with percentages and unfamiliar medical terms. Her eyes skimmed the page, trying to organize what she was seeing. Is this a test? She asked. Mr. Reed remained standing, his hands resting lightly on the back of the chair opposite her. It's a genetic report. Lillian looked up sharply. Why would you have that? Please, he said quietly. Just read the highlighted section. She looked back down. Her heart began to race as recognition crept in, not of the science, but of the conclusion printed near the bottom. Her name appeared there. So did his. Probability, 99.8%. She shook her head, a short, disbelieving laugh escaping her throat. This doesn't make sense. I know, he said. You said you didn't test me. I didn't, he replied. Your medical screening was processed through a third-party provider my company uses. Standard employment procedure. Her stomach dropped. So you accessed it anyway. I requested confirmation after the results flagged something unusual, he said. I didn't know what it would show. Not for certain. Lillian pushed the paper back toward him as if it might burn her skin. You're telling me this says? That you're my daughter? He finished. The word hit her like a physical blow. No, she said immediately. No. That's not possible. I wish that were true, he said softly. She stood so fast the chair scraped loudly against the floor. You can't just say something like that. I'm not just saying it, he replied. I'm showing you. Her breath came shallow now. You let me work here. You let me clean your house. You watched me every day. I didn't know at first, he said. When you applied, your last name caught my attention. That was all. It wasn't until months later that I began to suspect. And you kept quiet. Yes. Why? Her voice cracked despite her effort to keep it steady. He looked down. Because I wasn't sure what the right thing was. And because by the time I knew, I was already too late. She paced the room, her thoughts colliding, scattering. Memories rose uninvited. Her mother's long silences. The way she avoided questions. The nights she cried quietly in the kitchen when she thought Lillian was asleep. "You don't get to claim me now," Lillian said, turning back to him. "You don't get to decide this." "I'm not claiming anything," he replied. "I'm explaining." "You're explaining your way out of guilt." His jaw tightened. "I'm explaining a truth you deserve to know." She laughed again, sharper this time. "On my birthday?" The words landed between them. Mr. Reed's expression shifted, just slightly. "I didn't realize the significance of the timing," he said. "That makes it worse," she shot back. "Everything about this makes it worse." She moved toward the door, her hand reaching for the handle. "Lillian," he said, stopping her. "Please." She paused but didn't turn around. "I don't expect anything from you," he continued. "Not forgiveness. Not a relationship. Not even belief. I only wanted to be honest." She faced him again. "You waited 31 years to be honest." He didn't argue. Silence filled the study, thick and suffocating. "What do you want from me now?" she asked finally. He hesitated. That hesitation told her more than any speech could have. "I want you to stay," he said. "At least for now." Her hands curled into fists. "You want me to keep working for you." "I want you to have time," he said. "Time to decide what this means. And if I don't want that time here, I'll respect that." She searched his face for something: regret, manipulation, fear. She found pieces of all three. "I need space," she said. "You have it," he replied immediately. She opened the door and stepped into the hallway, her legs unsteady. As she walked away, she felt the house closing in around her, every polished surface suddenly unfamiliar. That night, in her room, Lillian sat on the edge of the bed and stared at her hands. They looked the same as always. Nothing about her body had changed. But everything else had. Downstairs, the house settled into silence once more. And somewhere in that quiet, a truth long buried had begun to breathe, whether Lillian was ready for it or not. The next morning, the house felt heavier than usual. Lillian moved through her routine mechanically, each step precise, as if the repetition could shield her from the thoughts swirling in her mind. She brewed Mr. Reed's coffee, laid out the morning paper, checked the guest wing, and polished the silverware. All the familiar tasks, all the motions she had done 100 times, but now each one carried an unspoken weight. Her birthday cake, the single cupcake, was gone from the kitchen counter. She hadn't eaten it. Somehow, she hadn't even remembered to blow out the candle. A strange mix of relief and guilt settled over her. She was suddenly aware of how alone she really was, even within this house full of polished surfaces and quiet order. By mid-morning, Mr. Reed emerged from the study. He moved slowly, carrying a folder in one hand. His presence filled the hallway in a way it never had before. "Lillian," he said, not a command this time, just a statement. "Yes, sir?" Her voice sounded smaller than she wanted it to. He stopped a few feet from her. "I'd like to talk, if you have a moment." She hesitated. She wanted to run back to her room, to her safe routines, but something about the way he held himself made her pause. The lines of his face, the way his eyes didn't quite meet hers at first. It wasn't anger. It wasn't expectation. It was uncertainty. She nodded. "Of course." He led her up the wide staircase to the study. The sunlight streaming through the tall windows illuminated dust in the air, catching it in tiny golden streaks. For the first time, she noticed how high the ceilings were, how deliberate the space felt. She'd walked these halls countless times, but today it all seemed foreign. He gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Please sit." Lillian perched on the edge, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Mr. Reed opened the folder and slid a single document toward her. "This is everything I've been able to gather," he said. "I think you need to see it." Her eyes scanned the paper. Photographs, letters, dates, names she recognized, hers and her mother's. And then a name that stopped her mid-breath: Thomas Reed. The room seemed to tilt. Her hands trembled slightly as she picked up the top page. "You," she began, but her voice caught. "I know," he said gently. "This is a lot to process." Her mind raced. Questions, accusations, disbelief. "You knew? You knew all this, and you, and I," she broke off, her thoughts colliding in the quiet room. "I didn't act hastily," he said softly. "I didn't want to overwhelm you. I wanted to be sure first." Her eyes burned. "You've been watching me all this time, and not as an employer, but as?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he leaned back, letting the silence stretch. When he finally spoke, his words were calm, measured. "I wanted to understand who you are before you understood who I am to you." Lillian's breath caught. "This is insane." "I know it feels that way," he admitted. "But please, read the letters. Look at the photographs. You deserve to know the truth." She did as she was told, though each word, each image felt like a blow. Her mother, young and smiling. Her father, no, not just her father, the man she had worked for every day, standing beside her mother in a photo from decades ago. The room fell silent except for the faint tick of a clock. Lillian's chest tightened as she absorbed the implications. "You're my father?" she whispered, almost a question, almost a statement. "I believe so," he said. "I only recently confirmed it. I didn't know how to tell you, or even if I should." The truth pressed against her ribs, heavy and unyielding. She staggered back, nearly knocking the chair over. You let me scrub your floors, wash your dishes, cook your meals, and you never said a word." "I wasn't sure what the right thing was," he replied quietly. "By the time I knew, I didn't know how to undo it." Lillian's voice rose. "You think telling me now fixes anything?" "No," he admitted. "It doesn't. It only explains it." She backed toward the door. Her hands trembled. Her heart pounded. "I need air," she said, barely above a whisper. "You have it," he said softly. "Take all the time you need." She fled the room, the door closing behind her with a soft but decisive click. In her small bedroom, Lillian collapsed onto the edge of the bed. The silence was deafening. The house seemed to hum with secrets she had never imagined it held. She had thought she understood her life. She had been wrong. And somewhere deep in her chest, a flicker of something new appeared: curiosity, fear, anger. A tangled mix she didn't yet have words for. Outside, the sun began to set over the estate, casting long shadows through the tall windows. And in that quiet, Lillian realized that nothing in her life would ever be the same again. Because now she knew the truth. And the truth was just the beginning. The next few days passed in a haze for Lillian. She moved through the Reed house mechanically, performing her duties with precision, but every step, every sound felt heavier. The silence of the rooms pressed against her like a weight. She kept glancing at the study door, half expecting Mr. Reed to call her in again, half hoping he wouldn't. He didn't. Breakfast passed without incident. Lunch was quiet. Dinner was quietly set out and left on the counter. The house moved around her like it had always done, polished, predictable, and impossibly still. But Lillian knew it wasn't the same house anymore. Nothing was. She kept replaying the conversation in her mind. The folder. The photographs. The DNA report. The words that had stopped her in her tracks. Asterisk, "I believe you're my daughter." Asterisk. Her thoughts were interrupted mid-afternoon by the sound of the intercom. "Lillian?" Her stomach tightened. She froze. "Yes, sir?" "Please come to the study." The voice was calm, not commanding, but the simple request made her heart pound. She swallowed hard and made her way upstairs, taking the steps slowly as if moving too fast would make the world tilt. When she entered, Mr. Reed was standing near the window, looking out at the estate with a faraway expression. The folder was back on the desk, neatly closed this time. "Sit," he said. She did hesitantly. "I wanted to apologize," he said without looking at her. "For the timing. For the way you found out. For everything." I don't know what I'm supposed to feel, she said honestly. Shock? Anger? Confusion? All of it at once. He finally turned to her. His eyes were softer than she had ever seen. It's normal to feel that way. I would feel the same. The room seemed smaller now, the air heavier. She could hear the faint hum of the heating system, the soft creak of the floorboards beneath her chair. For the first time, she noticed the small details she had never allowed herself to see, the way the sunlight caught the edge of a picture frame, the faint scent of polished wood, the almost imperceptible vibration of the wall from the distant highway outside. She spoke before she could stop herself. Why did you wait so long? Because I didn't know how, he admitted. Because by the time I realized, I didn't know what I could do that wouldn't hurt you further. She shook her head, incredulous. So you let me live in this house, under your roof, and do all the things I've done, knowing this? I didn't fully understand until recently, he said. I thought I was protecting you in a way. I thought giving you stability, giving you work, it would be enough. Stability? She repeated bitterly. You don't know the first thing about stability. He flinched slightly at her tone but didn't interrupt. Instead, he moved to the desk and opened the folder again, sliding a single sheet toward her. It's time you saw everything, he said quietly. Lillian looked down and saw a letter written long ago. Her mother's handwriting. The edges were yellowed, the ink slightly faded. Her fingers shook as she picked it up. The words were careful, deliberate, and full of unspoken fear. Evelyn Cross, her mother, had written about a man she had loved, about a child she had carried in secret, about threats and fears she had never explained to anyone. Tears pricked the corners of Lillian's eyes. She swallowed hard. Why didn't she tell me? Because she was scared, Mr. Reed said simply. And because she thought silence was safer. The weight of it pressed down on her chest. All those years of unanswered questions, of moments that didn't make sense, of quiet nights alone. They were pieces of a story she hadn't known she was missing. Lillian folded the letter slowly and set it down. So, this is it? You just tell me this and I'm supposed to forgive you? Accept this? No, he said softly. I don't expect anything from you. Not now. Not ever. I only wanted you to know the truth. For a long moment they sat in silence. The house seemed to hold its breath with them. The sunlight through the windows shifted, casting long shadows across the polished floor. Then he stood. You need time, he said. Time to process. Time to think. She nodded, barely able to meet his eyes. I do. Good, he said. Take all the time you need. Lillian left the study feeling more fragile than she had in years. She closed the door behind her, the sound echoing down the empty hallway. As she climbed the stairs to her room, a small thought flickered in her mind. The flame she had lit on her birthday, the candle she had burned alone in the kitchen, had somehow started all of this. All of it. And now she realized she couldn't unsee it. She couldn't unhear it. She couldn't go back. Some truths, once revealed, have a way of changing everything. And for Lillian, the quiet house she had called home was no longer the safe place she thought it was. Outside, the wind shifted, rattling the windows ever so slightly, as if the house itself was whispering that nothing would ever be the same again. The next morning, Lillian woke before the alarm, her mind restless. The house was quiet again, but the quiet felt different this time. It was heavier, like the walls themselves were waiting for her to make a move. She dressed slowly, tying her hair back, her fingers trembling slightly. The memory of the folder, the photographs, and the letter pressed against her chest, unrelenting. Breakfast was routine. She brewed Mr. Reed's coffee, sliced a bagel and set it on the counter. But her thoughts were elsewhere, spinning around one detail she couldn't shake, the Ohio address. The house where she had spent her early years. She hadn't thought about it in decades, and now, for some reason, it felt closer than ever. At mid-morning, the intercom buzzed. Lillian, please come to the study. Her stomach dropped. She hesitated, then exhaled sharply and climbed the stairs. The folder from yesterday lay open on the desk. Mr. Reed was standing behind it, his hands resting lightly on the polished wood. "I thought it would be best," he said quietly, "if you saw this." He pushed the folder toward her. Inside were letters, photographs, and documents she hadn't noticed before. One sheet in particular caught her eye, a handwritten note from her mother, dated just months before she had moved to Ohio. "Your mother moved here for your safety," he explained. "But she left hints, reminders, things that could have guided you." Lillian leaned closer. Her eyes scanned the note. Her mother had written about people from her past, people who had disappeared from her life without explanation. Names and addresses carefully listed, almost like instructions she never realized she was meant to follow. And at the top, the Ohio address, the house she had grown up in. Her breath caught. The memories began to flood back. The squeak of the front gate, the faint smell of her mother's cooking, the way the sunlight used to fall across the living room floor. She hadn't thought about these moments in years, and now they felt raw, immediate, and bittersweet. "Why show me this now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Because it matters," he said. "Everything your mother did, every choice she made, it led here. To you. To this moment." Lillian felt a strange mixture of anger and longing. Anger at the years of silence, the unanswered questions. Longing for the mother she had lost and the father she was only now meeting. She turned the folder over in her hands, hesitant to look further. There were more photographs, her mother with a man she didn't recognize at first, then the realization hit. It was Thomas Reed. The same man she had cleaned for, walked past, and served for years without knowing he was part of her past. I don't understand," she said, shaking her head. "Why now? Why all of this now?" "Because the past has a way of catching up," he said softly. "And sometimes it takes one small spark, a candle, a memory, a coincidence, to bring it to light." Her stomach twisted. She remembered the single birthday candle she had lit, alone in the kitchen. The tiny flame that had seemed insignificant at the time. And now, it wasn't. It had started a chain of events she could no longer control. "I need to see this house," she said suddenly, her voice trembling. "I need to understand where I came from." Mr. Reed studied her for a long moment. "I can take you there," he said finally. "But you need to be ready for what you might find. Some truths aren't easy to face." She nodded, more to herself than to him. "I don't know if I'll ever be ready, but I have to try." For a moment, the two of them were silent, the air between them filled with unspoken tension. The house itself seemed to hold its breath, as if aware that Lillian's past and present were about to collide. And then Mr. Reed spoke again, his voice lower, careful. "This is more than just a visit. It's a confrontation, with your past, your mother, and with me." Lillian swallowed hard, her pulse quickening. The folder in her hands felt heavier now, full of the weight of history and hidden truths. She realized that stepping into that house in Ohio would not just be a journey back in space, but a journey back in time, into memories, secrets, and revelations that could change everything she thought she knew about her life. The wind rattled the window pane lightly, carrying with it a sense of urgency, as if the world outside the Reed estate was quietly urging her forward. And for the first time in years, Lillian felt that mixture of fear and anticipation, the feeling of standing on the edge of something she couldn't yet imagine but couldn't turn away from. Because some doors, once opened, cannot be closed. Lillian couldn't sleep that night. Her mind kept replaying the photographs, the letters, and the folder Mr. Reed had shown her. The name that haunted her most wasn't hers or her mother's, it was his, Thomas Reed. The man she had worked for every day, the man who had spoken to her calmly and politely, had once been close to her mother in ways she was only beginning to understand. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the thin moonlight spilling through her window. The room felt smaller now, confined by memories and unanswered questions. The thought of Ohio, the old house, the creaking gate, the living room sunbeams, pulled at something deep inside her. Something she couldn't ignore. By morning she had made up her mind. She needed answers even if the truth hurt. Downstairs the house was quiet as usual. Mr. Reed was already gone to the study or perhaps elsewhere. She hadn't checked. The silence pressed against her chest, making her steps feel heavier than normal. She packed a small bag, a change of clothes, a notebook, a pen, and the folder. She wasn't sure what she would do with the documents, but she felt a strange compulsion to keep them close. They were a key, a map, and a warning all at once. "Lillian," Mr. Reed's voice came unexpectedly from the staircase. She froze. "Yes, sir?" she called, steadying her voice. He walked down slowly, hands tucked behind his back. "You're planning to go to Ohio?" She nodded. "I need to see it. I need to understand." He studied her for a long moment. "You do know it won't be easy." "I know," she said. "I have to do this." He nodded. "Very well. I'll arrange transportation." The drive to Ohio was long and silent. Lillian watched the countryside blur past the car window, fields stretching for miles, the occasional farmhouse or barn. She tried to focus on the present, but her thoughts drifted again to her mother, Evelyn Cross. The letters hinted at fear, secrecy, and a life carefully hidden. What had she been hiding? And from whom? When they arrived, the house looked exactly as she remembered it from childhood. The paint was peeling in places. The lawn was overgrown, and the gate squeaked in the wind as it swung open. She stepped out of the car, the folder clutched tightly in her hands, and felt a strange mixture of familiarity and alienation. "This is it," Mr. Reed said softly. "The place where it all began." Lillian took a deep breath and approached the front door. It was heavier than she remembered. She paused, hand on the knob, feeling the tension coil in her stomach. Every instinct screamed that someone, was waiting inside, though she didn't know who or what. She pushed the door open and stepped in. Dust motes danced in the sunlight streaming through the windows. The faint smell of old wood and forgotten memories filled the air. It was the same living room she had run through as a child, the same kitchen where her mother had hummed softly while cooking. And yet it was different. Still. Silent. Her eyes scanned the room, landing on a figure near the staircase. A woman older than Lillian remembered, with sharp eyes and an unreadable expression. She held a small stack of papers in one hand and looked at Lillian with an intensity that made her pause. "You're finally here," the woman said, her voice calm but firm. Lillian's throat went dry. Who are you?" The woman's lips curved into a small, almost imperceptible smile. "Someone who knew your mother better than you ever will. And someone who's been waiting a long time to meet you." Something cold settled in Lillian's chest. She had expected the past to be dusty, quiet, contained. She hadn't expected confrontation. "Why are you here?" she asked cautiously. "To make sure you understand everything," the woman said. "About your mother. About her choices. About the man you call Thomas Reed." Lillian's mind spun. What do you mean? You knew her? You knew him?" The woman nodded. "I saw what happened. I saw the secrets, the lies, and the fear. And now you've come to find out the truth." A chill ran down Lillian's spine. The house felt smaller now, the walls pressing in with the weight of hidden histories and unspoken words. She realized, with a mixture of dread and fascination, that everything she thought she knew about her life was about to be rewritten. And for the first time since the birthday candle, she felt completely unprepared for what was coming next. Lillian's hands shook as she stepped further into the house, her eyes darting between the woman and the familiar surroundings. The air smelled of aged paper, dust, and faint perfume, a ghostly residue of the past that made her chest tighten. "Sit," the woman said, gesturing toward the worn sofa in the living room. Her voice carried authority, but also a softness that hinted at a hidden kindness. Lillian obeyed, clutching the folder against her chest as if it were armor. "I'm Margaret," the woman said, finally introducing herself. I knew your mother before she moved to Ohio. I knew everything she tried to protect you from. Lillian's pulse quickened. Protect me? From what? Margaret hesitated, her eyes narrowing slightly. From the truth about your father. And from the enemies he, or rather he and circumstances created. Lillian's mind spun. Enemies? My father. Thomas Reed? Margaret nodded. Yes, the man you've worked for all these years. But it's more complicated than you think. Your mother tried to shield you, but she couldn't shield herself completely. Lillian's throat went dry. So, he knew about me this whole time? Yes, Margaret said gently. But he didn't act until recently. Until he had reason to believe you were ready. The words hit her like a punch. All those years of scrubbing floors, cleaning silverware, preparing meals, everything had been watched, guided, and measured by the man she now knew was her father. She felt anger flare, sharp and immediate. How could he, she asked, her voice trembling. How could he let me live like that and never say a word? Margaret leaned forward slightly, her hands clasped in front of her. He thought he was protecting you. He thought stability and distance were safer than truth. But life doesn't wait for the right moment. And sometimes the right moment arrives in ways no one expects. Lillian's gaze fell to the floor. So the candle, she whispered. My stupid birthday candle. That's what triggered all of this? Margaret smiled faintly. Sometimes it takes the smallest spark to illuminate a lifetime of secrets. A heavy silence settled between them. Lillian could hear her own heartbeat, loud and irregular, filling the quiet room. She felt like she was on the edge of understanding something enormous, yet terrifying. Then Margaret reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope. Your mother left this for you, she said, handing it to Lillian. She never had the chance to give it herself. She wanted you to understand the truth on your own terms, but she couldn't be here. Lillian's fingers trembled as she took the envelope. The handwriting was unmistakable, Evelyn Cross, careful and deliberate, each letter shaped with purpose. She tore it open, and inside was a single letter and a small photograph. The photograph was of her mother, younger than Lillian remembered, standing beside Thomas Reed. There was an ease between them in the photo, a fleeting moment of happiness that felt alien now. The letter read in part. Asterisk, my dearest Lillian, if you are reading this, it means the time has come for you to know. Your father, Thomas, loves you in ways I could not explain at the time. There are forces in the world I tried to protect you from. You are stronger than you know, and one day you will understand why I made the choices I did. Trust him. And trust yourself. Asterisk. Lillian's chest tightened. Tears blurred her vision. She knew, she whispered. She knew everything. Margaret nodded. She did. And now you have to decide what to do with this knowledge. Before Lillian could respond, the front door creaked open. A man's voice, familiar and unmistakable, echoed through the house. Lillian. Her heart leapt. Thomas Reed stepped inside, but not as the distant employer she had known. He looked vulnerable. Real. Human in a way she had never seen him before. His eyes met hers, wide and unguarded, and for a moment she saw not the billionaire, not the boss, not the figure of authority, but her father. I had to see you, he said, his voice low, raw. I couldn't let this wait any longer. Lillian's mind raced. Everything she thought she knew had shifted. The house, the letters, the photographs, they were all pieces of a puzzle she had never expected to solve. And now the missing piece stood in front of her, as real and as terrifying as the truth itself. Her emotions collided, anger, confusion, longing, disbelief. She wanted to run, to escape, to hide in the safety of what she thought was normal. But a part of her, the part that had always longed for answers, stayed rooted, unable to look away. Thomas Reed took a tentative step closer. I know this is sudden, overwhelming. But I need you to hear me, from me. Lillian's chest tightened. She gripped the letter in her hands. Her mother's voice, frozen in ink, seemed to whisper in her ears, trust him. And trust yourself, For the first time in her life, Lillian felt the weight of the truth pressing down in full, unrelenting force. And she realized, with a mixture of fear and anticipation, that nothing, absolutely nothing, would ever be the same again. The room felt impossibly small. Lillian clutched the letter in her hands as Thomas Reed stood just a few feet away, his presence filling the space with a strange mixture of authority and vulnerability. For years, she had seen him as the distant, untouchable billionaire she worked for, a man whose voice carried quiet commands and whose gaze rarely lingered. Now she was seeing him for what he truly was, her father. I don't know what to say, she admitted, her voice trembling. All of this, it's too much. Thomas nodded slowly, his hands folded in front of him. I know. And I don't expect you to understand it all at once. I don't expect forgiveness or even acceptance. I only hope you can hear me out. Lillian swallowed hard. Hear you out? You've had 31 years to say something, and now you expect me to just listen? I know it sounds impossible, he said quietly, but I didn't know how. And I hoped, that keeping you safe, letting you live your life would be enough. Enough? She echoed, her voice rising. Do you know what it felt like? Scrubbing floors, cooking meals, serving a man I didn't even know was this? You watched me every day and you never said a word. He flinched slightly at her tone but didn't interrupt. I didn't know how to tell you. And by the time I realized, it was already too late to step in without causing more pain. She shook her head, feeling tears prick at her eyes. You think hiding behind distance and silence protects anyone? It doesn't. It just makes them angry, confused, broken. Thomas stepped forward carefully, as if crossing some invisible line required permission. I know. And I'm not asking you to forgive me. I only want to be honest with you now. To give you the chance to understand before it's too late. Lillian's hands shook as she folded the letter back into the envelope. Her mind was a storm of emotions, anger, disbelief, curiosity, and a strange flicker of something she hadn't felt in years, hope. But it was tangled, messy, impossible to sort. Why now? She asked finally. Why tell me now when you could have told me years ago? He looked down at his hands for a long moment before meeting her eyes again. Because I found out something that changed everything. Something I couldn't ignore. And because I saw you day after day and realized that the life you deserved was more than I had ever given you. I wanted you to have the truth before it was too late for either of us. Her breath hitched. What do you mean, too late? He hesitated, then spoke carefully. There are things from the past, decisions, people, circumstances, that can't be undone. But knowing the truth can at least give you a choice now. A chance to decide for yourself. Lillian felt a chill run down her spine. So, all this time you've been living in your world, building your life, and I've been living in mine, never knowing, never asking, and now it's like I'm supposed to merge the two? He shook his head. Not merge. Not yet. I'm not asking you to. I'm asking you to understand. To decide how, if at all, we move forward. She swallowed, her chest tight. Do you know how hard it is to process something like this? To see the man I cleaned for every day, the man whose life I've observed from a distance, and suddenly realize he's my father? I can only imagine, he said softly. I can't take away the years. I can't take away the pain. All I can do is offer you the truth, and my presence if you want it. For a long moment Lillian said nothing. The silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken words and the weight of decades lost. She could feel the history of her life pressing down on her, the memories of her mother, of her childhood in Ohio, of all the questions that had never been answered. Finally she exhaled sharply. I don't know if I can handle this yet. I need time. He nodded, his expression unreadable but patient. Take all the time you need. I'll be here when you're ready. No pressure. No expectations. Only honesty. As she turned to leave the living room, the photograph of her mother and father on the desk caught her eye. She lingered for a moment, staring at it. A memory flickered, her mother smiling softly, unaware of the life that would follow, unaware of the secrets she carried. Lillian's hands curled into fists at her sides. She felt a mixture of grief, anger, and an unexpected tenderness. She realized then that the truth wasn't just a revelation, it was a responsibility, a choice. And she wasn't sure she was ready to make it yet. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees surrounding the old Ohio house, as if urging her forward. Yet inside, Lillian felt rooted to the spot, caught between the life she had known and the life she was only beginning to understand. The first major emotional confrontation was over, but the second twist, the one that would shatter her assumptions about her mother and her father, was still waiting in the shadows. And she could feel it coming. Lillian didn't sleep that night. She lay on the narrow guest bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the old house settle and creak as if it were breathing. Every sound felt louder than it should have been. A footstep that wasn't there. A door that might open. A truth that refused to stay quiet. Her mother's letter rested on the nightstand, folded neatly, as if it could contain everything it had unleashed. She reached for it more than once, then stopped, afraid that reading it again would only deepen the ache already sitting in her chest. Just before dawn, a soft knock came at the door. "Lillian," Margaret's voice called gently. "Are you awake?" She pushed herself upright. "Yeah." Margaret stepped inside, carrying 2 mugs of coffee. She set one down and studied Lillian's face for a moment, her expression tightening with concern. "You look like someone who's been running all night without moving an inch." "That's accurate," Lillian said quietly. They sat at the small kitchen table, the same one where Lillian had blown out her candle days earlier, believing she was invisible to the world. Steam rose between them, filling the silence. "There's more," Margaret said finally. "More than what Thomas told you. More than what your mother put in that letter." Lillian's stomach dropped. "You mean, there's something worse?" Margaret didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached into a drawer and pulled out a thin notebook. Its cover was worn, the edges soft with age. "Your mother asked me to keep this. She said if anything ever happened to her, and if you ever came looking for answers, I was to give it to you." Lillian stared at it. "Why didn't she give it to me herself?" "Because she was afraid," Margaret said. "Not of you. Of what the truth might cost." Lillian opened the notebook slowly. Inside were dates, short entries, fragments of thoughts written in her mother's familiar handwriting. Not polished. Not poetic. Raw. Urgent. Her eyes caught on one line almost immediately. "Thomas isn't the danger. He never was. Her breath caught. "What does that mean?" "It means," Margaret said carefully, "that your mother wasn't just hiding you from the world. She was hiding you from someone specific." Lillian flipped pages faster now. Mentions of meetings that ended abruptly. Phone calls taken in the bathroom. Fears scribbled between grocery lists and reminders. Then she saw it. A name she didn't recognize repeated over and over. "Who is Daniel Hart?" Lillian asked. Margaret's face hardened. "That's the man your mother loved before Thomas. And the man who refused to let go." The room felt suddenly colder. "You're saying he was my father?" "No," Margaret said firmly. "Thomas is your father. But Daniel believed you were his." Lillian's heart pounded. Believed? Your mother left Daniel when she realized how controlling he was becoming. How obsessed. When she found out she was pregnant, she didn't know who the child belonged to at first. By the time she did, Daniel had already convinced himself you were his. Lillian's hands shook. "So he knew about me?" "Yes," Margaret said softly. "And he was angry that your mother disappeared. Thomas helped her leave. Helped her start over. That's when the threats began." The words slammed into Lillian, rearranging everything she thought she understood. Her mother hadn't been distant or secretive for no reason. She had been afraid. Constantly. So my whole life, Lillian said slowly, was shaped by a man I've never met. Margaret nodded. And that's why Thomas stayed away. He believed that if he didn't acknowledge you publicly, you would remain invisible to Daniel. Lillian let out a hollow laugh. Invisible. That word again. Margaret reached across the table. Your mother hated that choice, but she believed it kept you alive. Lillian closed the notebook, her chest tight. Anger rose again, but this time it had nowhere clear to land. Her mother had sacrificed closeness. Her father had sacrificed presence. And she had grown up believing she simply wasn't worth staying for. Does Thomas know you're telling me this? Lillian asked. Margaret hesitated. He knows parts of it. Not all. There are things your mother never told him. Like what? Before Margaret could answer, a phone buzzed on the counter. Margaret glanced at the screen, then went pale. What is it? Lillian asked. Margaret swallowed. It's a blocked number. But I know who it is. Lillian's pulse spiked. Daniel? Margaret didn't answer. She simply turned the phone face down. And in that moment, Lillian understood something chilling. The past wasn't finished with her. It had just found her again. The phone stayed face down on the counter, buzzing again a few seconds later before going silent. The sound lingered in the air like an aftershock. Lillian stared at it, her heart beating too fast. How do you know it was him? Margaret didn't answer right away. She stood, walked to the window, and peered out at the quiet street as if expecting someone to be standing there. When she finally spoke, her voice was lower. Because he only calls when he thinks he's losing control. Lillian pushed back her chair. You're telling me this man has been watching my life from the shadows and now he's just calling? He's always watched, Margaret said. From a distance. Through people. Through rumors. He never stopped believing your mother stole something from him. Lillian's hands curled into fists. I'm not something to be stolen. No, Margaret said firmly. You're not. But obsession doesn't respect truth. The front door opened behind them. Both women flinched. Thomas stepped inside, his coat still on, his expression tight. He took one look at Margaret's face and knew. He reached out, Thomas said quietly. It wasn't a question. Margaret nodded. Just now. Lillian turned on him. You knew he might come back. Thomas met her gaze without deflecting it. I knew it was a possibility. I didn't know it would be this soon. That's not comforting, Lillian snapped. I know, he said. But I won't lie to you anymore. Silence pressed in again, heavier this time. Lillian felt like the walls were closing in, every truth narrowing her choices. What does he want? Thomas exhaled slowly. Control. Recognition. And if he can't have those, chaos. Margaret stiffened. You should leave this house today. Both of you. Lillian blinked. Leave? Yes, Margaret said. Daniel knows this place. He won't come himself, but he'll send someone. He always does. Lillian felt a chill crawl up her spine. So what, I just run? Again? Thomas stepped closer, his voice steady but urgent. This isn't running. This is protecting yourself. There's a difference. She laughed bitterly. Funny how protection always looks like disappearance in my life. Thomas flinched but didn't argue. You're right. And I hate that I played a part in that. But right now, I need you safe. For how long? She asked. He hesitated. Just for a second. But it was enough. There it is, Lillian said softly. You don't know. Margaret reached for Lillian's hand. There's a place in upstate New York. Quiet. Secure. No public records tied to you. Lillian pulled her hand back gently. No. I'm done being hidden without a say. Thomas studied her, really studied her, as if seeing her strength clearly for the first time. Then we do this differently, he said. How? By telling you everything, he replied. All of it. No more partial truths. They moved into the living room. Thomas didn't sit. He paced, rubbing his hands together like a man trying to warm himself. Daniel wasn't just controlling, he began. He was careful. He built leverage, files, financial pressure. He ruined people quietly. Lillian's stomach tightened. And my mother? She refused to be owned, Thomas said. That made her dangerous to him. Margaret swallowed. Evelyn came to me crying one night. She said Daniel had found out about Thomas helping her leave. That's when the threats escalated. Lillian's voice was barely a whisper. Is that why she died? The question hung in the air, terrifying in its simplicity. Thomas stopped pacing. No, he said firmly. Her death was an accident. I investigated it myself. But Daniel showed up at the funeral, Margaret said quietly. Lillian's breath caught. He was there. Yes, Margaret said, standing at the back, watching you. A memory surfaced then. A tall man in a dark coat. A gaze she'd felt without understanding. She had been 16, grieving, unaware. Her knees felt weak. She sat down hard on the sofa. So he's seen me, known where I am. This whole time. Thomas nodded. Which means the call today wasn't curiosity. It was confirmation. Confirmation of what? Lillian asked. That you finally know who you are, Thomas said. And that I'm back in your life. The phone buzzed again. This time Thomas picked it up. He didn't answer. He simply stared at the screen, jaw tightening. He wants to remind me, Thomas said quietly, that secrets can still destroy lives. Lillian felt fear, yes, but beneath it, something else was growing. Resolve. Then maybe, she said slowly, it's time someone stopped letting him control the narrative. Thomas looked at her, surprised. Margaret's eyes widened. Lillian stood. I spent my whole life being invisible to survive. I'm not doing that anymore. Outside, a car passed slowly down the street. Too slowly. And for the first time, Lillian understood that knowing the truth didn't just change her past. It put her directly in the path of someone who never liked losing. Lillian stood by the window long after the car disappeared, her reflection staring back at her like a stranger she was still learning to recognize. The fear hadn't gone away. It had simply sharpened, edged with purpose now. We can't stay here, Thomas said quietly. Not tonight. Margaret nodded in agreement. I'll make a few calls. People I trust. No, Lillian said, turning around. Her voice surprised even her. It was steady. Not yet. Both of them looked at her. Thomas frowned slightly. Lillian, this isn't about pride. This man is. I know who he is, she interrupted. Or at least, I know who he thinks he is. And I'm tired of everyone making decisions for me because they're scared of him. Margaret's expression softened. Being brave doesn't mean being reckless. I'm not trying to be brave, Lillian said. I'm trying to be present. For once. She took a breath, then said the words she'd been circling since the candle, since the letter, since the truth cracked her life open. I want to go back to the house. Thomas stiffened. Absolutely not. The estate, she clarified. Your house. The one where I worked. Margaret blinked. Why would you want to go there? Because it's the last place he'd expect me to feel empowered, Lillian said. And because if he's watching, he already knows I'm not hiding anymore. Thomas rubbed his temples. You don't understand how exposed that makes you. I understand more than you think, she replied. I lived there. I know the rhythms, the staff, the blind spots. And if Daniel believes I'm still the quiet maid who keeps her head down, that's his mistake. Silence followed. Heavy. Loaded. Thomas studied her for a long moment. Something in his expression shifted. Not fear this time, but reluctant respect. You're a lot like your mother, he said. Lillian's jaw tightened. She deserved better than fear. So do you, he said softly. Margaret exhaled. If you go back, you won't be alone. I don't want to be alone, Lillian said. I just don't want to disappear. An hour later they were on the road. The sky had darkened, clouds gathering low and heavy, pressing against the horizon. Lillian sat in the back seat, watching familiar highways slide past, her thoughts racing. Every mile felt like a step deeper into something she couldn't yet name. When the estate gates came into view, her chest tightened. The iron bars opened slowly, almost ceremonially like they always had. She remembered standing on the other side of them countless mornings, adjusting her uniform, reminding herself to stay invisible. Tonight, she stepped through wearing her own coat, her own shoes, her own name. Inside, the house was quiet. Too quiet. A few staff members lingered in the background, surprised murmurs following her as she walked in beside Thomas. No one stopped her. No one questioned it. She moved instinctively toward the kitchen. The familiar hum of the refrigerator, the faint scent of lemon cleaner, the soft clink of glass, it grounded her. This was where she had lit the candle, where everything had shifted. You don't have to stay here, Thomas said gently. I do, she replied. Just for a moment. She sat at the small kitchen table, resting her hands on the surface. The memory of the flame flickering in the dark returned, vivid and sharp. She hadn't been weak then. She had been honest. A voice broke the silence. Did you hear? Two housekeepers whispered near the doorway, unaware Lillian could hear them. About her, one said. Yeah. They say she's not just staff. Lillian didn't turn around. She didn't need to. The words didn't sting the way they once might have. Thomas shifted uncomfortably. I'll speak to them. No, Lillian said calmly. Let them talk. Margaret glanced at her. You're sure? Yes. Secrets rot in silence. Just then the doorbell rang. The sound sliced through the room. Cling. Deliberate. Everyone froze. Thomas's eyes darkened. No one scheduled. Margaret checked her phone. No messages. Lillian stood slowly. Her pulse was loud in her ears, but her steps were steady. I'll go. Thomas grabbed her arm. Lillian. She met his gaze. If he sent someone, they already know I'm here. The intercom crackled to life before anyone could stop her. A guard's voice came through, tense. Sir, there's a man at the gate. Says he's an old friend. Lillian's breath caught. What's his name? Thomas asked. There was a pause. Daniel Hart. The room seemed to tilt. The past had stopped circling. It had arrived. Lillian froze, her hand still hovering over the doorknob. Daniel Hart. The name echoed in her mind like a gunshot in an empty hall. She felt the old familiar rush of fear, sharp, cold, and unrelenting. But beneath it, a steadier pulse of resolve had begun to rise. Thomas moved beside her, placing a protective hand lightly on her shoulder. Stay calm, he said, his voice low but firm. We expected this possibility, but he won't catch you off guard. Lillian swallowed hard, her throat tight. He's been watching my entire life. Every step. Every moment I thought was mine. He thought that, Thomas corrected. But you've been preparing for this without even knowing it. Margaret appeared in the doorway, her notebook in hand. I've alerted the local authorities and a few trusted contacts. No one comes through that gate without being seen. But you two need to stay together. Do not let him isolate you. The intercom buzzed again and Lillian felt her stomach twist. She pressed the button hesitantly. Who's there? A calm, measured voice came back. Lillian, you finally understand. I hope you're ready to talk. Her blood ran cold. Every nerve in her body screamed at her to retreat, to run, to hide. But she didn't. Not anymore. Thomas stepped in front of her slightly, blocking her from the view of the security cameras. He's trying to intimidate you, he said. Don't respond emotionally. Lillian inhaled sharply. I'm not afraid, she said louder than she felt. I'm not invisible. I'm not running. The gate slowly creaked open and a sleek black car rolled onto the driveway. A man stepped out, tall, well-dressed, with a calm confidence that made the hairs on the back of her neck rise. Daniel Hart. She recognized him immediately, not from the photos in her mother's notebook, but from instinct, from years of feeling his shadow around her life. His eyes locked on hers. There was no hesitation, no doubt, only a controlled intensity that made the air between them thrum. "You're braver than I expected," he said, his voice smooth but cold. "I assumed the girl who disappeared would still hide." Lillian's chest tightened, but she squared her shoulders. "I'm not hiding." A slow smile spread across Daniel's face. "Good. That makes this more interesting." Thomas's hand tightened on her shoulder. "Lillian, stay close." Daniel took a step forward. "You've learned the truth about your parents, about the choices that shaped your life. Now it's time you understand mine." Lillian's stomach churned. "Your choices nearly destroyed my mother. They haunted me for years. I won't let you control me anymore." Daniel tilted his head, studying her. "Control? I don't want to control you. I want acknowledgement, recognition. And if I can't have it," his eyes darkened, "then I make sure no one else gets it either." The wind picked up outside, rattling the windows, carrying a faint echo of the trees around the estate. Lillian's pulse raced, but a strange clarity came over her. For the first time, she wasn't just the frightened girl from the kitchen. She was someone who had survived secrets, lies, and silence. Someone who had confronted the truth, and now confronted the very danger her mother had feared. Thomas stepped closer to Lillian, ready to intervene. But she shook her head slightly. "Let me do this," she whispered. Daniel's gaze flicked between the two of them, calculating. He smiled again, slower this time, almost impressed. "I like her," he said. "But this is just the beginning." Margaret placed a steadying hand on Lillian's back. "Stay focused. Stay calm." The front door opened fully, and the first words of a confrontation that would alter everything were spoken. Daniel stepped inside. And in that instant, Lillian realized the second major twist. The one her mother's notebook had hinted at but never fully revealed, was about to change everything she believed about her family, her father, and even herself. The house held its breath. So did she. Because nothing in her life had prepared her for what was about to happen next. Daniel Hart's presence filled the room like a storm. Lillian could feel the tension in the air pressing against her, her chest tight, her hands curling into fists at her sides. He was calm, composed, but there was an unmistakable danger in the way he moved, like a predator circling, waiting to see her reaction. "You've grown into quite the woman," Daniel said, his voice smooth, almost teasing. "Not the quiet, obedient girl I expected." Lillian's jaw tightened. "I'm not the girl you knew. I'm not invisible. And I'm not afraid of you." He tilted his head, studying her like she was a puzzle he hadn't yet solved. "Ah, but fear isn't always obvious, is it? Sometimes it hides behind defiance." Thomas stepped forward, his body angled protectively. "Step outside. Now, before this gets ugly." Daniel's gaze shifted briefly to Thomas, then back to Lillian. "I didn't come for a fight, not yet. I came for answers." Lillian's heart pounded. "Answers? You want answers after all these years? After watching my mother live in fear, after haunting my childhood?" "Yes," Daniel said, his eyes darkening. "Answers, recognition, and truth. The truth you've never known." "Enough," Lillian shouted. "The only truth I need is what you've already tried to hide. You tried to control my life through fear. You tried to dictate who I could be. But I'm not a child anymore. I'm not your pawn." Daniel's eyes flickered, a mix of frustration and admiration crossing his face. "You have spirit," he said quietly. "Your mother warned me you'd be strong, but this," he gestured toward her, "this is more than I imagined." Margaret stepped closer to Lillian. "Daniel, leave her out of your games. She's not yours to manipulate." He laughed softly, almost bitterly. "Games? No, this isn't a game. This is about acknowledgement. Recognition of the sacrifices your mother made. The decisions she took to survive and to protect this girl. Lillian's pulse quickened. My mother protected me at the cost of her peace. She left me questions. She left me shadows. But she never left me broken. And I refuse to be your audience while you rewrite history. Daniel's expression softened slightly. You misunderstand. I don't wish to hurt her memory. I only need to know. Did she lie to me, or did she save me from the life I wasn't ready to see? Lillian's stomach tightened. She didn't lie. She survived. She chose to live. That choice cost her everything, including her life. Thomas's jaw tightened, his hands clenching. You have no right. Enough, Thomas. Lillian said sharply, cutting him off. She stood taller, her voice steady. This is between me and him. I will hear what I need to hear, then it ends. Daniel's eyes softened. Your mother, she loved me once. She loved me fiercely. But circumstances, fear. I lost her before I could ever claim her. And when she disappeared, I sought answers in the only way I knew how. And yes, my obsession grew. But I never stopped caring for her, for you. Lillian's hands shook. She gripped the edge of the counter. The words made her head spin. Daniel had not been a distant threat alone. He had been driven by obsession, yes, but also by something resembling love. A dangerous, misguided love that had shaped her life from the shadows. And now, she asked, her voice quiet but firm. What happens now? You've watched. You've controlled. You've haunted. What's your next move? Daniel hesitated, the mask of confidence slipping for the first time. I don't know. I didn't expect to meet the woman she made you into. I expected fear, compliance, silence. Lillian's eyes blazed. Well, you were wrong. I'm none of those things. And if you think you can dictate how I move forward, think again. My mother's choices made me strong. Your obsession made me resilient. And I am no longer afraid. For a long moment, silence filled the room. Daniel studied her closely, perhaps seeing for the first time the full consequence of the life he had tried to control. Finally, he took a step back. Very well, he said slowly. You have surprised me. Perhaps there is hope yet. The tension didn't leave, but a shift had occurred. Lillian realized the second major twist, the one Margaret had hinted at in her notebook, was not just about secrets from the past. It was about confronting the danger that had followed her for years and reclaiming the life she had been denied. Outside, the wind rattled the windows, carrying the faint echo of the world beyond the estate, a world that Lillian now felt ready to face on her own terms. And for the first time she understood. Fear had shaped her, yes, but courage would define her next steps. The morning after the confrontation, the estate felt different, still quiet but charged with a new energy. Lillian walked through the halls slowly, her steps echoing softly on the polished floors. The weight of the past week pressed against her, but it was no longer crushing. It felt manageable, like a mountain she was ready to climb rather than one that had fallen on her. Thomas met her in the kitchen, holding a steaming cup of coffee. His usual composure was softened by the tension of the previous day. You slept at least a little? He asked, not unkindly. Lillian shook her head. A few hours, maybe. But I don't feel restless. I feel awake. Thomas studied her carefully. Good. You've come a long way in just a few days. You're facing truths most people spend a lifetime avoiding. She sipped her coffee slowly, letting the warmth settle into her hands. I used to think surviving meant being invisible, following orders, staying out of the way. Now I know surviving can also mean standing your ground. Speaking, acting, choosing. Thomas nodded, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Your mother would be proud. Lillian's eyes softened. I hope so. I think she wanted me to understand that life isn't just about following rules or hiding from danger. It's about making decisions even when they're hard, even when they hurt. Margaret entered quietly, holding the notebook Lillian had gone through the night before. She left a lot for you to discover, Margaret said. And now you're discovering how to navigate it on your own terms. Lillian looked at her, gratitude mingling with a newfound determination. Thank you, for helping me see it clearly, for guiding me without taking control. Margaret smiled faintly. You had it in you all along. I just reminded you that strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet, like the candle you lit. Lillian's mind drifted to that night, the single birthday candle flickering in the dark kitchen. That small act of self-assertion had ignited a chain of events that reshaped her life. She realized she had carried that flicker of courage inside her all along. It had just needed space to grow. Thomas cleared his throat. There's something else we need to do, he said. We need to secure your future, your safety. And that means more than staying hidden. Lillian tilted her head. I'm listening. He handed her a folder, one thicker than the one she had brought with her. These are documents. Legal protections, safe accounts, alternate identities if necessary, and a few contingencies for unwanted interference. Her fingers brushed the paper, feeling the weight of both caution and possibility. You're giving me choices, she said softly. Yes, Thomas replied. Because this time you decide. You've seen the past. You know the danger. But you also know your own strength. Lillian took a deep breath, letting the reality sink in. For the first time, she felt like she was steering her own life, rather than being swept along by circumstances she hadn't understood. Margaret placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. You're ready to face whatever comes next. And you're not alone. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees again, carrying the faint scent of rain. Lillian looked out the window, feeling the sunlight break through the clouds. The storm of her past was not gone, but she had learned how to stand in it without being broken. She folded the documents carefully and looked at Thomas. I want to rebuild things. With you. With Margaret. With my life. He nodded, relief and pride flashing across his face. Then we'll do it together. For the first time in years, Lillian felt the clarity of control, tempered by compassion and guided by choice. The estate no longer felt like a place of shadows and fear. It felt like a starting point. And for the first time in her adult life, she wasn't just surviving. She was beginning to live. The days that followed felt like stepping into a world she had only glimpsed from the shadows. Lillian moved with purpose through the estate, not as the timid maid she had once been, but as someone fully aware of the stakes and ready to claim her space. Thomas had given her access to the office he rarely allowed anyone to enter. The walls were lined with files, digital terminals, and folders she had only seen from a distance. Now she was learning the tools her father had used to protect his empire, and, by extension, to safeguard her. Margaret guided her through the logistics. We can't predict everything Daniel might do, but we can anticipate patterns. He relies on fear and assumptions. If you don't play by them, you take the power away. Lillian leaned over the desk, studying maps, security footage, and contact logs. So what you're saying is, knowledge is my weapon? Margaret nodded. Exactly. Awareness is your shield. Confidence is your sword. Thomas cleared his throat. And it's not just about defense. You'll need to confront the past directly if you want freedom. That means understanding what he truly wants, and making choices before he tries to impose them on you. Lillian felt the adrenaline surge through her. For years she had been reactive, cleaning, serving, surviving. Now she was proactive. The realization was intoxicating. She wanted more than safety. She wanted control. Later that evening, she sat alone in the old kitchen, reviewing every detail she knew about Daniel Hart. Her mind traced his obsessions, his moves, and his miscalculations. She realized that the man who had haunted her life wasn't invincible. He relied on fear, secrecy, and her own hesitation. Remove those and he had no leverage. She rehearsed what she might say if he returned, how she would assert herself, how she would draw boundaries without faltering. The small kitchen, once a place of loneliness and despair, had become a training ground, a laboratory for courage. Margaret joined her, leaning against the counter. "You've changed since the confrontation," she observed. "You're not just stronger. You're deliberate now. Every word, every move measured." Lillian smiled faintly. "I'm tired of being invisible. I need to live my life on my own terms." "And you will," Margaret said. "But remember, strength isn't just courage in the moment. It's patience, strategy, and timing. Your next step is coming. You'll know when it's right." Just then, a knock echoed through the house. Not at the gate this time. Not a phone call. A deliberate, slow knock at the front door that made Lillian's pulse spike instantly. She froze, instinctively scanning the room for any signs of Daniel. Margaret's eyes met hers, wide but calm. Thomas moved quickly, heading toward the door, but Lillian stopped him. "I'll do this," she said firmly. Slowly, she walked toward the door, each step measured, controlled. She opened it just enough to see a familiar figure standing outside, not menacing but confident. Daniel Hart. He raised a hand slightly in acknowledgement. "Lillian, I see the changes. I see strength. I see her." Lillian's pulse thundered. "You're here. Again." "Yes," he said softly. "Because I can't ignore what's been hidden from me. Because I need to see the truth for myself." She took a deep breath. "Then see it. See that I'm not the girl you thought I was. See that I make my own decisions now. And see that fear doesn't control me anymore." Daniel's eyes studied her, scanning every detail, searching for cracks, hesitation, the remnants of old fear. But he found none. "Impressive," he said finally, almost in admiration. "I didn't expect this." Lillian's lips pressed together, holding back a mixture of anger and satisfaction. "Then know this, I am not yours to command. I am not invisible. And I am not afraid." The wind stirred outside, rustling the leaves and carrying the faint scent of rain. Daniel's gaze lingered for a moment longer, then he nodded, slowly. "You've changed everything," he said. "And perhaps that is what your mother wanted all along." Lillian stepped back, closing the door gently but firmly. The confrontation had ended, not with submission or compromise, but with her reclaiming control. Thomas and Margaret were waiting behind her. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. Her posture, her calm, the fire in her eyes said it all. For the first time, the shadow of Daniel Hart's presence felt manageable. He was still a threat, yes, but now he was a challenge she could meet head-on. And Lillian knew without a doubt that the life she had been denied, her own life, was finally within reach. The morning after Daniel's unexpected visit, the estate felt lighter, though the tension of the past days still lingered in every shadow. Lillian moved through the halls with a sense of purpose, her steps no longer hesitant. Every sound, the soft creak of the wooden floors, the distant hum of the refrigerator, the wind brushing against the windows, felt like a rhythm she could finally step in time with. Thomas joined her in the library, a rare smile on his face. "You've handled yourself remarkably," he said, leaning against the doorway. "Even Daniel didn't break you. That says more about your mother's strength than anything else." Lillian shook her head, a thoughtful frown crossing her face. "It's more than her strength. It's realizing that I have my own. And I can use it. I don't need to hide anymore or wait for someone to protect me." Thomas nodded slowly. "Good. Because the next step isn't just about defense. It's about reclaiming your life entirely. Choices, control, and accountability. That's what makes freedom real." Margaret appeared from the hallway, carrying the worn notebook Lillian had inherited from her mother. "You've seen the past," she said softly. "But the future is yours. Don't let it be dictated by fear or expectation." Lillian opened the notebook again, tracing her mother's handwriting, remembering the sacrifices, the secrecy, and the courage it took to protect her. "Mom wanted me to live," she said quietly. "Not just survive. And I intend to honor that. Every day." A soft chime echoed through the house. Lillian glanced at her phone, messages from friends she had distanced herself from over the years. Invitations, congratulations, even a few long overdue apologies. For the first time, reconnecting didn't feel like vulnerability. It felt like reclaiming a part of herself that had been hidden away. Thomas watched her carefully. "You're stepping back into the world," he said. "But carefully. Don't rush. Observe. Engage. Set boundaries. You're finally defining your terms." Margaret smiled. "And you don't have to do it alone. We're here. Your mother trusted us for a reason. You can trust us too." Lillian took a deep breath, feeling a calm she hadn't known for years. The storm of fear, secrecy, and hidden truths was still there, but it had shifted. It no longer dominated her life. It had become part of her story, not the whole story. Later that afternoon, she walked through the estate's gardens, sunlight filtering through the trees. Each step felt like a declaration, each breath a reminder of the life she could now claim. Memories of hiding, of scrubbing floors silently, of lighting that birthday candle alone, they were still there. But they no longer defined her. She stopped near a fountain, the gentle sound of water soothing her. Thomas and Margaret joined her, standing quietly by her side. No words were necessary. The silence was filled with understanding, trust, and the unspoken acknowledgement that the past had been faced and survived. Then her phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number. *, I see you now, and I respect your choice. Dish. *. Lillian read it slowly, letting the weight of the message sink in. Daniel Hart, the man who had haunted her life for decades, had acknowledged her strength. He hadn't threatened. He hadn't demanded. He had recognized her autonomy. She showed the message to Thomas and Margaret. "He knows," she said. "And yet, he respects it." Margaret nodded. "It's rare for people like him to see strength without trying to dominate it. You've changed the narrative." Thomas smiled, placing a hand on her shoulder. "And now you continue it. Your life, your choices, your story." Lillian closed her eyes for a moment, letting the sunlight warm her face. For the first time she felt the full weight of freedom. Not as an abstract concept, but as a tangible reality she could hold, shape, and live. The past had shaped her, yes. It had tested her, frightened her, and pushed her to the edge. But now she understood that life was not about the shadows that followed her. It was about the light she could create in the spaces she owned. And Lillian was ready. The estate felt almost peaceful the next morning, the sun spilling through the tall windows and warming the polished floors. Lillian moved through the rooms with a quiet confidence, no longer weighed down by shadows of fear or the uncertainty of her past. Each step felt deliberate, as if she were reclaiming not just the house, but her own life. Thomas joined her in the main hall, carrying a folder of letters, documents, and records. "I've spent the night organizing everything. Legal matters, business concerns, safety protocols. You name it. You're ready for this?" he said, his tone a mixture of pride and seriousness. Lillian took the folder, flipping through the papers. She saw her name in bold letters, attached to assets, accounts, and protections that had been painstakingly built for her over the years. For the first time she felt fully recognized, not just as a child of secrets, but as a person with autonomy and influence. Margaret entered, holding the notebook her mother had entrusted to her. "There's one more thing," she said softly. "Something your mother wanted you to see before the past truly closes." Lillian raised an eyebrow, curious but cautious. "What is it?" Margaret opened the notebook to a section Lillian hadn't read before. Letters her mother had written to her, never sent. They were full of candid reflections, regrets, and hopes. One page in particular stood out. "Lillian, if you are reading this, I hope you know that everything I did was for your safety. I could not protect myself fully, but I trusted you to be brave. I trusted you to find your own strength. And I hope that one day you can forgive the world for what it took from us, and forgive me for what I could not give you. You are loved beyond measure. Always." Tears welled in Lillian's eyes, but she didn't wipe them immediately. She let the words sink in, the final bridge between her mother's life and her own. For years she had carried the weight of absence, uncertainty, and fear. Now she felt a release, a quiet, steady affirmation that she was not alone. Thomas placed a hand on her shoulder. She always believed in you. And so do I. Margaret does too. You don't have to navigate this alone anymore. Lillian exhaled slowly, letting the tension in her body unwind. I understand that now. I understand the sacrifices, the risks, and the love. I'm not the scared girl who hid behind a candle anymore. Margaret nodded. Your mother lit that candle for you in the darkest moments. Now it's your turn to carry the flame. Just then a quiet knock came at the front door. The three of them turned, wary but alert. Lillian's heart skipped a beat. Could it be Daniel? Another unexpected threat? She opened the door to find a courier holding an envelope with her name on it. The handwriting was unfamiliar, precise, and elegant. She took it carefully and opened it. Inside was a single note. Asterisk, strength deserves recognition. You have it. Live it fully. A friend, asterisk. Lillian looked at Thomas and Margaret, a small smile forming. It seems the world is finally acknowledging me, she said quietly. Margaret chuckled softly. And this is just the beginning. Thomas exhaled, a rare expression of relief crossing his face. The past has been faced, the threats are known, and the truths are out. Now it's your life, fully in your hands. For the first time in years, Lillian felt the weight of freedom, not as an abstract idea but as something tangible she could hold, shape, and live. The estate no longer felt like a cage or a shadowed past. It was a home, a place of memory but also of opportunity. She stepped out into the morning light, feeling the breeze on her face. The sun warmed her skin, and the air smelled faintly of rain and possibility. She could hear the faint sounds of life around the estate, the staff moving, birds chirping, the gentle rustle of trees. Lillian's gaze lifted to the horizon. The road ahead was still uncertain, filled with challenges she could not predict. But she knew she could face them. She had faced fear, deceit, obsession, and loss. And she had survived, not just survived but grown. Turning back toward Thomas and Margaret, she said softly, "Thank you. For staying, for guiding me, for believing when it was hardest." Thomas gave a small nod, his eyes warm. "You did all the hard work yourself." Margaret smiled, her voice gentle. "Now it's time to live the life you were meant to have. No shadows, no fear. Just you." Lillian inhaled deeply, the sun on her face, the world around her vivid and alive. The past was behind her, the present hers, and the future, finally, open. And for the first time she felt whole. The morning light poured through the tall windows of the estate, filling every room with warmth. Lillian stood in the main hall, looking around with a sense of clarity she had never felt before. This house, once a place of shadows, secrets, and fear, now felt like a sanctuary, a foundation from which she could finally rebuild her life. Thomas joined her quietly, carrying a small tray with coffee and fresh pastries. He placed it on the table beside her. "I thought you might need a moment to reflect," he said gently, "before the day begins." Lillian smiled faintly, taking a sip of coffee. The warmth spread through her, a simple comfort that felt almost luxurious after so many years of tension and uncertainty. "I never imagined I'd feel like this," she said softly. "Peaceful, in control, and alive." Thomas nodded. "It's hard-earned. You've faced fear, deceit, obsession, and loss, and you've come through stronger." Margaret entered from the hallway, holding the notebook Lillian had inherited from her mother. "She left a legacy," Margaret said quietly. "Not just of secrets and warnings, but of courage and love. And now you carry that legacy forward." Lillian took the notebook in her hands, flipping through the pages one last time. The letters, the hidden notes, the truths her mother had preserved, all of it spoke to her now in a way it hadn't before. It wasn't just the past she was holding. It was guidance, trust, and the strength to chart her own path. "Mom wanted me to be brave," Lillian whispered. "And now, I am." There was a knock at the front door. Lillian glanced up, wary, but there was no tension this time, only curiosity. She opened the door to find a familiar figure standing there, calm and composed. Daniel Hart. He didn't step forward aggressively, didn't bring the weight of fear he once carried. Instead, he offered a small nod of acknowledgement. "You've grown into the woman I should have known years ago," he said. "You've faced what I never could, your past, your fears, and yourself." Lillian's expression was steady. She no longer felt the icy grip of fear. Instead, she felt recognition, clarity, and a strange sense of closure. "I've faced it all," she replied. "And I've survived. That's the only acknowledgement I need." Daniel's eyes softened. "I see that, truly. And perhaps, for the first time, I understand her choices. Your mother made sacrifices I never fully appreciated. And you, Lillian, you've taken her courage and made it your own." He paused, then turned and left, not with threats, not with demands, but with a quiet understanding. Lillian watched him go, feeling the last tendrils of the shadow he cast over her life begin to fade. She closed the door and turned back to Thomas and Margaret, a sense of finality settling over her. "It's done," she said. "The past has been faced, the threats acknowledged, and the truths revealed." Margaret smiled softly. "And you're free. Free to live, to grow, to love, and to define your life on your own terms." Thomas nodded, pride evident in his expression. "The future is yours now. Every choice, every path, you decide. And you've proven that you can handle whatever comes." Lillian stepped outside into the garden, sunlight warming her face, the faint scent of blooming flowers in the air. She inhaled deeply, savoring the moment. For years, life had been dictated by fear, secrecy, and control. Now the only direction was forward. She thought of the single birthday candle she had lit alone in the kitchen, the small act that had started this chain of events. That flicker of light, once fragile and lonely, had grown into a fire within her. And now she carried it fully, unafraid, unshaken, unstoppable. Lillian lifted her face to the sky, letting the sun bathe her in warmth. She was whole, empowered, and ready. The shadows of the past no longer defined her. She had reclaimed her life, and nothing, not fear, not obsession, not loss, could take that away. As she walked through the garden, the wind carrying the gentle rustle of leaves, she smiled. The estate, the past, the trials, they were all part of her story. But from here on out, she was writing her own chapters. And for the first time, she was free to live fully, fearlessly, and entirely on her own terms. The light of her own life had begun, and nothing could extinguish it.